For years, it was the most talked about podcast on the planet.
Do you listen to Serial?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, listen all the way through.
This is a global Cal-Link prepaid call from
Adnan Syed,
an inmate at a Maryland correctional facility.
The first true crime podcast sensation.
The most incriminating piece of physical evidence against Adnan Syed was a fingerprint, or rather a palm print, on a map.
Serial chronicles the case of Adnan Syed, who in 1999 was accused of killing his high school ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. He was 17.
18-year-old Hae Min Lee disappeared on January 13th. Police found her half-buried body. She had been strangled.
In 2000, Adnan, who maintained his innocence, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The case against him was largely pinned on the testimony of one witness, his friend Jay.
no one can ever come with any type of proof or anecdote or anything to say that I was ever mad at her, that I was ever angry with her, that I ever threatened her.
In 2015, Adnan was granted a new hearing thanks in part to evidence uncovered by Serial. In 2018, he won another appeal, but in 2019 he was denied a new trial. Subsequent appeals were repeatedly knocked back, until today. After 23 years behind bars, Adnan Syed walked out of court a free man.
There was a huge gasp in the whole room, and I think the moment it became real for me is when the judge said, please remove his shackles. That is when I shed a tear.
A Baltimore judge released the now 41-year-old, overturning his conviction after a review from the prosecution found key evidence had been withheld from the defence, an act known as a Brady violation. The review also discovered two new suspects.
One of whom threatened to kill the victim and had motive to kill the victim, and both of whom had a pattern of violence against women.
For now, Adnan has been placed on home detention. The state has 30 days to set a new trial date or dismiss the case entirely.
We're not yet declaring Adnan Syed is innocent, but we are declaring that in the interest of fairness and justice, he is entitled to a new trial.
Well, Susan Simpson is an attorney instrumental in the release of Adnan. She joins us now. Susan, how big is this decision?
It's huge. It is the decision we've been working towards for me personally, 8 years now, and for Robbie, of course, ever since Adnan's conviction back in 2000.
What seems unusual about this case is it was actually the prosecution saying that they're not happy with the conviction. What had they found?
They discovered two documents in particular. From what I understand, they are handwritten notes that show two different witnesses came to the prosecution and said, there's this alternate suspect who had made threats to kill Hae Min Lee. He has concerning history. And in fact, he went on to be convicted of multiple rapes. And these documents that reflect that witnesses told investigators this were never given to the defense. They were not disclosed. It's a huge deal. That's not how our system's supposed to work. It's not how this should have happened. And what the prosecution did here was the right result.
Well, it sounds scary to me that that could even happen.
It happens all the time, unfortunately. And what's unusual here is not that it happened, but that it eventually was discovered and that the prosecution actually took a stand and said, we are ethically obligated to ask the court to vacate the conviction because these flaws mean that Adnan Syed's conviction does not meet the standards of our system.
The podcast Serial played a huge role in this case. I mean, does this conviction get overturned without it?
Serial was instrumental in getting attention for this case, and that attention brought the case the resources it needed for a proper investigation.
The other thing is the role of the podcast. Now, you're a lawyer and a podcaster. We're starting to see more of this interaction between crime, podcasting and prosecution. Do you think this is a positive development?
A lot of it's new ground that everyone's trying to figure out. But it's happening because cases that needed attention never had it before, and now they finally are. And now there finally is accountability for what's going on. And with that attention, the cases can't be easily just shoved aside. They can't just be forgotten like that. And prosecutors and other political actors are forced to grapple with them.
So what's next for Adnan? Are we likely to see a retrial?
This was not the state saying, we believe he's innocent, we're never going to go back to this. It's them saying that the conviction cannot stand. They don't stand behind it. And they plan to reinvestigate or to continue investigating this case. Theoretically, they could bring, if their investigation found that actually they think Adnan did this, they could charge him with it. It does seem like they have a serious interest in these two other alternate suspects. And I very much hope their investigation will look into things that should have been looked into from the start.
There is, of course, a victim in all this, and I heard today that Hae Min Lee's family is actually quite upset, not just at the development, but the fact they didn't know that this investigation was going on. This must be really upsetting for them.
This is one of the awful effects of when the system gets it wrong, is that the families that have depended on the finality they were given are then told, sorry, there was never finality, despite what the prosecution has told you. That is no longer what they believe. We didn't actually get justice for you after all. That's a lot to grapple with. And then to compound that with the possibility that someone who may not have been involved, someone who is innocent, may have not been suffering in prison wrongfully for decades, that's a lot to process.
How is Adnan doing?
He is enjoying his first night outside of bars. Well, as an adult, he was 17 when this happened, and he has grown up in prison and has spent more than half his life behind bars. So tonight's the first night of the rest of his life.
Well, it's been fascinating chatting to you, Susan. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Gosh, there's as many words as this story has had over the years. It needs no words. When you just see that before photo at 17 and then the after photo of a 41-year-old man leaving court, and it just tells you the full story.
Totally different people.
Yeah.